Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Relaxing. Tonight you are lying half awake inside a wooden wagon that groans softly as the wind pushes against its sides. The canvas above you snaps and settles, snapping again, like it cannot quite decide whether to protect you or betray you. Frost creeps along the edges of the boards, tracing thin white lines where your breath has already failed to keep up. Somewhere nearby, a mule shifts its weight and lets out a low, tired sound that feels oddly comforting in the dark. This is not the romantic frontier you were promised. This is the version that reminds you very gently, but very firmly, that you probably would not survive this without a lot of stubborn luck. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is there right now. There is something strangely fitting about sharing the hour while you imagine yourself here listening to the wind scrape across an endless trail. Now dim the lights and you let the story carry you forward without pause. You are not thinking about the entire journey tonight. You're thinking about this single stretch of darkness between sunset and dawn. Out on the trail, surviving the coldest nights begins long before you close your eyes. It starts with the quiet, uneasy awareness that once the sun sinks, there is no warm house waiting for you. There is only what you brought, what you built, and what you can improvise. As evening fades, the ground beneath, the wagon radiates a cold that feels almost alive. A mainstream historical fact, often mentioned by historians, is that many wagon families travelled west in the spring or early summer, specifically to avoid winter conditions. Yet cold nights still found them with alarming regularity. Even in warmer months, temperatures on the plains and in mountain passes could drop sharply after dark. You feel that truth now seeping upward through the soles of your boots and into your bones. You stay dressed. Everyone does. Removing clothing at night feels reckless, almost arrogant, as if you are daring the cold to prove a point. Layers of wool, cotton, and whatever patch garments you own press against your skin. They itch, they smell faintly of sweat and smoke, but they are your best defense. You learn quickly that comfort is not the goal. Warmth is. The wagon itself offers only modest protection. Its wooden sides block the wind somewhat, but the canvas top might as well be paper when a strong gust hits. The sound is constant. Flap, scrape, see. Each noise pulls you halfway out of sleep, your body alert for danger even when your mind wants rest. Some nights you envy the families who choose to sleep beneath the wagon, using it as a shield against wind rather than a container that traps cold air inside. A quirky detail that shows up in diaries from the trail is that some travellers stuffed spare clothing sacks of grain or even folded newspapers into cracks and corners of the wagon at night. You imagine doing the same, pressing anything soft into gaps where cold air sneaks in. It feels almost silly, like tucking in a drafty old house, but out here small efforts matter. Nearby the campfire is already burned low. Fires are comforting, but they are also honest liars. They promise warmth and then abandon you as soon as the wood turns to ash. Most families let their fires die down before sleeping, partly for safety, and partly because there simply is not enough fuel to keep them going all night. You stretch your hands toward the last faint heat, knowing it will not follow you into the wagon. You are aware of the others around you even in the dark. A cough from another wagon, a baby whimpering before being softly shushed. The low murmur of adults exchanging a few last words, voices hushed, as if loud sounds might invite trouble. Shared body heat becomes a quiet strategy. You press close knees, touching shoulders, overlapping not out of affection, but necessity. Historians still argue whether families who slept tightly packed fared significantly better in extreme cold, but first-hand accounts suggest it at least felt like survival. The smell of the night is unmistakable. Smoke clings to your clothes. Damp wool carries a sharp animal scent. There is earth too raw and mineral rising from the ground itself. These smells become familiar enough that years later survivors could recall them with startling clarity. Right now they blend into the background of your breathing, anchoring you to the moment. Sleep does not come easily. Your mind wanders, half listening to the wind, half replaying the day. You think about how much ground you covered, how much you still have to go. You think about the children, their smaller bodies losing heat faster, needing extra blankets that are always in short supply. There is an unspoken rule that adults endure discomfort, quietly saving warmth for those who can. At some point you wake without knowing why. The silence feels different, thicker. You hold your breath for a second listening. Then you hear it. Snow, or perhaps sleet tapping lightly against the canvas. Not loud enough to panic, but enough to remind you how exposed you are. Weather changes quickly on the trail, and forecasting amounts to little more than educated guesswork and folk wisdom. Scholars still debate how much travellers truly understood the climates they crossed versus how much they simply endured. You shift slightly, careful not to wake anyone else. The boards creak under your movement. Your fingers feel stiff, reluctant to bend. You tuck your hands deeper into your sleeves, trapping what little heat remains. Somewhere outside, an animal snorts, then settles again. The rhythm of its breathing becomes oddly soothing. Hours pass this way, measured not by clocks, but by how often you wake and resettle. The night feels endless, stretched thin by cold and anticipation. Yet slowly, almost imperceptibly, the darkness begins to soften. The wind eases, the air still bites, but there is a sense that you have made it through to another trial. When dawn finally hints at itself, pale and uncertain, you realize something important. Surviving the coldest nights on the trail is not about conquering nature. It is about enduring it, about making peace with discomfort, listening closely and learning night by night how little you truly need to keep going. You wake before the sun, not because you're rested, but because the cold refuses to let you sleep any longer. Your eyes open to a dim grey light filtering through the canvas, and for a moment you forget where you are. Then the stiffness in your joints reminds you. The ground beneath the wagon has been pulling heat from you all night, slow and relentless, like a quiet thief. You lie still, listening to the faint sounds of camp coming back to life. A pot clinks. Someone clears their throat. A horse stamps, annoyed and impatient. The earth is the real problem. You learn that quickly on the trail. Cold air is uncomfortable, yes, but the frozen ground is unforgiving. A well-known historical detail noted in many trail journals is that wagon families often underestimated how much heat they lost to the soil beneath them. Even when temperatures were only mildly cold, the ground acted like a sponge, soaking warmth out of sleeping bodies hour after hour. You feel that truth in your hips, your shoulders, anywhere that pressed too long against wood and dirt. You try to stretch, but your muscles resist, tight and sore. Fingers tingle as blood slowly returns, each movement sharp and unpleasant. This is the tax you pay for making it through the night. Around you, others are waking in their own quiet ways. No one greets the morning cheerfully. Mornings on the trail are practical affairs. You endure them before you improve them. You swing your legs down and immediately regret it. The air near the ground feels colder, heavier. Your boots wait where you left them, stiff as boards. Pulling them on takes effort, both physical and mental. There is a particular frustration in wrestling frozen leather before you have even eaten. Still, you know better than to complain. Complaining wastes warmth. Someone nearby mutters a short prayer, not loud enough to be a performance, just enough to be heard. Another family is already coaxing life back into last night's fire. Smoke rises reluctantly, hugging the ground before drifting away. The smell hits you sharp and familiar, and with it comes a small sense of relief. Fire means progress. Fire means the night is over. A quirky habit recorded in several pioneer accounts involves laying bedrolls over piles of grass or straw when possible, even inside the wagon. You remember trying that once, gathering handfuls of brittle prairie grass before dark. It helped a little. Not enough to make the night pleasant, but enough to remind you that even thin barriers matter. Every layer between you and the earth is a negotiation with the cold. You notice how careful everyone is as they move. No one rushes. Quick movements lead to mistakes, and mistakes in cold weather can cost fingers, toes, or worse. Children are watched closely, hands rubbed, feet checked. There is a constant low-level awareness that the smallest body is the most vulnerable. You feel that responsibility settle on you again, heavy but familiar. Breakfast is simple. It has to be. Hard bread softened in warm liquid. Maybe a bit of bacon grease if you are lucky. The food is not exciting, but it is warm, and warmth is everything. As you eat, you feel life returning slowly, like a dim lantern being turned up notch by the notch. Steam rises from cups and bowls, briefly fogging the air before disappearing. You think about last night, about how you positioned yourself, what worked and what did not. This kind of reflection is constant on the trail. Each night becomes a lesson for the next. One widely accepted observation among historians is that survival on the overland trails depended heavily on adaptability. Families who adjusted routines quickly tended to fare better than those who clung to habits that no longer served them. You resolve to add more padding tonight somehow, even if it means sacrificing something else. The wagons themselves bear the marks of these cold nights. Wood contracts and creaks. Iron fittings snap with sudden sharp sounds that make everyone flinch. Repairs are made in the morning light, fingers numb tools, cold the touch. You watch as someone tightens a bolt brace, puffing visibly with each effort. Everything takes longer when it is cold. Despite the discomfort, there is a strange calm to the routine. The night has passed, you are still here. There is comfort in that simple fact. Scholars still argue whether the psychological resilience of wagon families was as important as their physical preparations, but moments like this suggest the mind played a larger role than people once admitted. You cannot change the cold, but you can change how you meet it. As the sun finally breaks free of the horizon, its light spills across the camp, pale but promising. It does not bring much warmth yet, but it brings clarity. Frost sparkles on the ground, turning ordinary dirt into something briefly beautiful. You pause just for a second to take it in. These small moments become anchors, keeping you steady through the harder parts. Packing up begins slowly. Blankets are shaken stiff with frost. Bedrolls are rolled tight, each fold practiced. You feel the ache in your back as you lift and carry, but movement helps. It always does. Blood flows, muscles loosen. The cold retreats slightly grudgingly. You know tonight will come again, and with it another test. But for now there is motion, purpose, and the open trail ahead. You climb back onto the wagon, settling into your place, already thinking about how you will face the darkness when it returns. Not with confidence exactly, but with experience. And that you are learning is how wagon families survived the coldest nights. One uncomfortable lesson at a time. As the day stretches forward, the memory of last night's cold does not fade. It rides with you tucked into your muscles and joints, a reminder that darkness will return whether you are ready or not. The wagon rolls steadily, wheels groaning in a rhythm that becomes almost hypnotic. With each turn you glance at the canvas overhead, thin and weathered, knowing it will soon be your only roof again. Canvas is a strange kind of protection. It blocks the sun well enough and keeps out most rain, but cold slips through it without asking permission. A commonly accepted historical detail is that wagon covers were made of heavy cotton or linen treated with oil or wax to repel water, not to insulate. Warmth was never part of their design. You feel that truth every time a breeze passes through, brushing your face as if the wagon were barely there at all. By late afternoon the air sharpens. You can sense it before you see it. Shadows lengthen, light turns thin and pale, and the wind grows restless. You begin preparing early, knowing better now than to wait. Anything that needs doing before dark must happen soon. Nightfall on the trail is not gradual, it drops. You gather what you can. Extra clothing is folded and set aside. Blankets are shaken, checked for dampness, and kept dry at all costs. Even slightly wet fabric becomes a liability when the temperature falls. You remember someone once mentioning that moisture steals heat faster than almost anything else, and you believe it completely. A quirky but well-documented habit among some Wagon families involved rubbing a thin layer of animal fat on exposed skin before sleeping. It sounds unpleasant. It is, but it helped block wind and retain warmth. You hesitate, then do it anyway, wrinkling your nose at the smell. Out here, dignity is negotiable. As the wagons circle for the night, their placement matters more than most newcomers realise. You angle yours so the broadside faces the prevailing wind, using the wagon itself as a barrier. Others do the same, forming a rough shield around the camp. This is not about defence from people, it is about defence from weather. Historians still argue whether such arrangements significantly improved nighttime warmth, but the practice was common enough to suggest it brought at least a sense of control. The fire is built early before hands stiffen and patience thins. Flames leap eagerly at first, then settle into a steady burn. You cook while you can, knowing the warmth will not last. Supper is eaten quickly, bowls cradled close to chests, fingers wrapped tightly around spoons. Steam rises and vanishes into the evening air. As the light fades, the temperature drops fast. The warmth of the fire becomes localized, almost mocking. Step back 2 paces and it is gone. You memorize that feeling, the invisible boundary between heat and cold, because you will cross it soon. When it is finally time to settle in, you do so with intention. The wagon floor is layered as best you can manage. Spare sacks, folded clothes. Anything to keep your body from touching the boards directly. You know now that the ground will try to claim your warmth, and you refuse to make it easy. You climb inside, the familiar scrape of boots and shifting bodies filling the small space. The canvas rustles above you, already catching the night breeze. You lie back, eyes open, listening. The sounds are sharper now. Wind in grass, a distant howl that could be a coyote or just your imagination. The wagon creaks softly, adjusting to the cold. Despite everything, there is a strange intimacy to these moments. The closeness, the shared breathing, the unspoken understanding that everyone here is doing their best with what they have. Scholars still debate how much these shared hardships strengthened family bonds, but you feel something settle in your chest that goes beyond simple endurance. Sleep comes in fragments. You drift, wake, and adjust. Your breath fogs faintly in the air. At some point, snow begins to fall, tapping lightly against the canvas. It sounds almost gentle, but you know better. Snow means more cold waiting in the morning. You tuck your chin down, pulling fabric closer around your face. Your thoughts slow. The wagon rocks slightly as the wind changes direction. You ride that motion, letting it carry you just far enough away from discomfort to rest. This is not comfort. It is accommodation. It is learning how to exist within limits. And as the night deepens, you understand something important. The canvas was never meant to save you. It was meant to give you a chance. What you do with that chance is what determines where the morning comes. Night comes on more gently this time, but you do not trust it. Experience is already teaching you caution. The sky softens into muted colours, and the wind eases just enough to feel deceptive. You finish the last small tasks with a steady focus, aware that what you wear tonight may matter more than what you eat. Clothing on the trail is never just clothing, it is structure. It is insulation. It is sometimes the only barrier between you and a long, shiverier night. You begin layering with care, choosing garments not for comfort or appearance, but for how they trap air. Wool goes closest to your body, scratchy but dependable. Over that comes cotton, then heavier outer pieces stiffened by dust and use. You notice how the weight adds up, how your movements grow slower as you build yourself into something sturdier. People of the time understood this instinctively. Period accounts show that travellers relied heavily on wool garments, knowing they retained heat even when damp and outperformed most other fabrics available to them. You appreciate that wisdom, now tugging sleeves down over your wrists, tucking fabric wherever skin might be exposed. Someone nearby laughs quietly as they wrestle into an extra layer. The sound brief but reassuring. Humour still exists here, even in small doses. It helps. You pull a scarf or shawl up around your neck, remembering how much warmth escapes from there. No one taught you that formally. You learned it by waking cold too many times. A lesser-known practice some families adopted involved wearing tomorrow's clothes to bed, including outer garments. It made sleep awkward and stiff, but it saved precious time and warmth in the morning. You do the same now, settling into your layers with a resigned exhale. This is not about elegance. This is about efficiency. As you prepare, you become aware of how different everyone's approach is. Some pile on everything they own. Others choose fewer layers, relying instead on shared blankets and proximity. The evidence from journals suggests no single method worked best for everyone. What mattered was adjustment, the ability to notice what failed and try something else the next night. When darkness finally settles, it feels heavier than before. The air presses in. You climb into the wagon, slowly, careful not to undo the careful balance of layers you have built. Sitting down sends a jolt of cold through your legs as the boards greet you. You grit your teeth, then shift until the feeling dulls. Inside, the smell of wool and leather surrounds you. It is not unpleasant, just deeply familiar now. You lie back, adjusting collars and cuffs, making sure nothing rides up. Fingers fumble slightly, already less responsive than they were an hour ago. The night sounds gather around you. Wind moving through grass. Canvas creaking softly. Somewhere far off, a single animal call cuts through the dark, then fades. You breathe slowly, feeling how the layers trap warmth close to your skin. It is not cozy, but it is workable. There is ongoing debate among modern researchers about whether layering alone was enough to prevent dangerous heat loss during especially cold nights, or whether it simply delayed the inevitable without additional shelter. Lying here, you suspect the answer depends on the night, on the wind, on the ground, on luck. You tuck your hands under your arms, a position you have learned helps more than gloves ever did. Your knees draw up slightly, conserving warmth. The position is not ideal for rest, but it keeps your core protected. Sleep comes in cautious waves, shallow but persistent. At some point you wake to adjust again. A sleeve has ridden up. Cold air sneaks in, immediately sharp and unwelcome. You fix it quickly, heart beating faster for a moment. Even small exposures feel dramatic when everything else is sealed tight. Time stretches, minutes blur. You focus on breathing, on the gentle weight of fabric, on the fact that you are warmer than you were the night before. That matters. Progress here is incremental, measured in fewer shivers and longer stretches of rest. Just before dawn, the cold seems to sharpen once more, as if making a final argument. You endure it quietly, knowing what comes next. Light, movement, fire. Warmth returning, slowly and unevenly, but returning all the same. When morning finally arrives, you peel yourself out of layers, stiff with use. Your body aches, but it functions. That feels like a victory. You look around at the others, similarly bundled, similarly tired, and you understand something fundamental. Surviving the cold is not about mastering the environment. It is about learning how to build a small, fragile bubble of warmth around yourself and carrying it forward night after night without breaking it. By the time the next evening settles in, you understand something that would have surprised you when the journey began. Warmth on the trail is rarely a solitary achievement. It is communal, negotiated quietly through proximity and shared space. As daylight thins, you notice how people drift closer together, without discussion, wagons edging nearer bodies, unconsciously forming clusters. The air cools quickly once the sun slips away and you feel it on your face first. Cheeks tighten, noses sting. You pull your collar higher and glance around, gauging where you might fit best tonight. No one announces these decisions. They unfold naturally, guided by instinct and necessity. Accounts from the overland trails frequently note that families slept packed tightly together, sometimes layering children between adults like living insulation. It sounds harsh, but it worked. Smaller bodies benefited from shared warmth, and adults accepted discomfort as part of the arrangement. You feel that truth now as you settle in close shoulder, pressed against another, knees brushing, the brick worn thin by weeks of travel. There is a strange comfort in the closeness. You can feel breathing beside you, steady and warm. The subtle rise and fall becomes something you sync to your own breath, slowing to match. This is not intimacy as you might think of it at home. It is cooperation in its simplest form. One unusual detail mentioned in a handful of diaries describes families arranging themselves by size and heat output, placing those who ran warmer on the outside edges. It was never formalized, more trial and error than science, but people noticed patterns. You suspect someone has noticed yours too because you end up nearer the middle tonight, wrapped in shared blankets that smell faintly of smoke and dust. The wagon creaks softly as weight shifts. Canvas sighs overhead. Outside, the fire has dwindled to embers, its warmth now a memory rather than a resource. You pull the blanket higher, feeling multiple layers of fabric trap air between them. It works better this way. You can feel it. There remains disagreement among historians about whether shared body heat significantly reduced cases of nighttime hypothermia, or if it simply made the cold more bearable without changing outcomes. Lying here, you cannot measure survival rates, but you can measure sensation. You're warmer than you were alone. Sleep comes unevenly. Someone shifts. A child stirs, then settles again. You resist the urge to move too much, knowing any change might let cold rush in. Patience becomes another layer you wear. Your mind drifts, half awake, half dreaming. You think about how quiet this closeness is, how few words are exchanged. Out here, warmth is spoken through action rather than reassurance. A blanket pulled higher, a body angled slightly closer. Small gestures that mean everything in the dark. At some point, the wind picks up, rattling the canvas and testing the edges of your shelter. You feel the cold probe for weaknesses slipping in, where fabric gaps or blankets shift. You adjust, instinctively pressing closer, sealing the space again. It feels almost like teamwork, even though no one is fully awake. The hours stretch, but they do not feel endless tonight. There is a rhythm to the breathing around you, a collective endurance that carries you forward. You're not warm exactly, but you are contained, protected in a way that feels earned. When dawn finally arrives, pale and uncertain, you wake, tangled in blankets and limbs. There is stiffness, yes, and the lingering ache of a night spent folded into yourself, but there is also relief. You made it through together. As people disentangle themselves, quiet laughter breaks out, soft and tired. Someone cracks a small joke about never sleeping alone again. You smile even as you stretch aching muscles. You realize then that surviving the coldest nights is not only about what you bring or how you build. It is about learning when to lean in, when to share space, and how to accept help without needing to ask. Out here, warmth is rarely owned. It is borrowed, shared, and passed along one close night at a time. The fire is already shrinking by the time you start thinking seriously about the night ahead. Flames lick low, their confidence gone, replaced by a thin line of glowing coals that promise more comfort than they will ever deliver. You sit close for as long as you dare, hands extended, palms aching, as warmth briefly returns. It feels almost unfair how quickly it fades when you pull back. Out here, fire plays tricks on the mind. It looks powerful, sounds alive, but when darkness settles in fully, you realize how small its reach really is. Records from the trail make it clear that most wagon families could not afford to keep fires burning all night. Fuel was too precious and unattended flames were too risky. The fire's job was to cook to dry to reassure. It was never meant to guard you until morning. You watch as the last bits of supper are finished and the pot is scraped clean. People linger near the heat longer than necessary, reluctant to surrender it. Eventually, someone pokes the coals flat, spreading them thin so they burn out safely. Smoke curls upward, carrying that familiar scent that will cling to your clothes again tonight. A small, curious habit shows up in a few lesser-known accounts of trail life. Some families heated stones in the fire before bed, wrapping them in cloth and placing them near feet or hands once inside the wagon. It was a gamble. Too hot and you risk burns. Too cool and it was useless. You consider it, then decide against it tonight. Experience has made you cautious of solutions that can turn against you while you sleep. As the fire dies, the cold seems to rush in eager and immediate. It fills the space the warmth leaves behind, claiming it without resistance. You feel it on your face, sharp and insistent. Breathing changes, slower, shallower. Each exhale fogs faintly in the air. You climb it into the wagon, already missing the illusion of heat. Inside it feels darker than before, as if the fire had been lending more light than you realized. You settle into your place, listening to the quiet shuffle of others doing the same. The wagon rocks slightly as weight shifts, then steadies. The cold makes itself known quickly. It creeps along the floorboards, rises to all your legs, presses against your sides. You adjust blankets, pulling them tight, tucking edges carefully. There is an art to it now, a method learned through repetition. Seal the sets, protect the core, accept the rest. There is still disagreement among scholars about how much reliance on campfires shape nightly routines versus how much families adapted to their inevitable absence. Lying here, you suspect the answer is simple. The fire was a starting point, not a solution. Everything that mattered happened after it was gone. Sleep arrives in short stretches. You drift wake and drift again. The cold sharpens your awareness, keeping you close to the surface of rest. Every sound feels amplified. A log shifting in the fire ring, a horse snorting softly, wind brushing the canvas with careful fingers. At some point you wake to a deeper quiet. The fire is fully out now. No crackle, no glow, just darkness and cold sharing the space. You resist the urge to sit up, knowing it would cost more warmth than it gains. Instead, you focus inwards, drawing arms close, curling slightly tighter. Your thoughts slow. The discomfort becomes background noise rather than a threat. This is something you have learned without realizing it. The ability to stop fighting the cold directly and instead work around it. To let it exist without letting it dominate every thought. Near the coldest part of the night just before dawn, the air feels almost brittle. You can sense the temperature dropping further even without moving. This is when the fire's absence is felt most keenly. And yet you endure, so does everyone else. When the first hint of light finally touches the canvas, you feel relief wash through you, subtle but real. The night did not need to be conquered. It only needed to be survived. The fire will return soon. Warmth will follow slowly and imperfectly. You sit up carefully, joints, stiff breath visible. Outside, someone is already coaxing new flames to life. Smoke rises again, carrying promise with it. You wrap yourself tighter as you wait, knowing now that fire is not your saviour. It is simply one tool among many, and never the one that stays with you when the night grows longest or the last light fades while you're still moving. Tonight you do not wait for full darkness to think about food. Experience has taught you that cooking late is a mistake. Fingers lose their precision too quickly, and patience disappears even faster. You stop while the sky still holds a trace of colour, while your hands can still do what you ask of them. Supper is simple and deliberate. Everything is planned around heat and speed. A pot is set on the fire contents, chosen for how quickly they warm, rather than how exciting they taste. This was common practice along the trail. Travellers learned early that meals eaten hot and early helped bodies retain warmth longer into the night, especially when the air turned sharp after sunset. You crouch close to the flames, stirring slowly. The smell rises, familiar and grounding. Fat and grain, smoke and iron. You breathe it in, letting it settle you. Around you others do the same, drawn into the small circle of heat. Conversation is minimal but not unfriendly. There is comfort in shared routine. Someone nearby pulls a small wrapped bundle from their supplies, revealing a dense grease-heavy cake saved for cold nights. It looks unappealing, but they break it carefully, sharing pieces. These high-calorie foods were often reserved for evenings like this, when the body would burn energy simply trying to stay warm. You accept your piece, chewing slowly, feeling the warmth spread as it goes down. There is a curious note in a handful of trail journals about families deliberately eating more fat at night even when rations were tight. It felt counterintuitive to some, but those who did often swore by it. You understand why now. The fullness lingers a quiet source of heat you can carry with you. As bowls empty, the fire is fed one last time, just enough to finish the task. No one lingers longer than necessary. The cold is already pressing in from the edges, testing resolve. You pull back, wrapping yourself tighter, aware that this warmth is temporary. Inside the wagon, you settle quickly. There is no lingering, no unnecessary movement. The earlier meal sits heavy but comforting like an anchor. You feel it working slow and steady. It does not make you warm exactly, but it gives your body something to draw from. Opinions differ among researchers about how much nighttime nutrition influenced survival compared to shelter and clothing, but many first-hand accounts emphasize the role of food in enduring cold nights. Lying here, you suspect it is not about a single factor. It is about how everything adds up. Sleep comes more easily tonight, at least at first. Your stomach is full, your body tired. The cold still finds you creeping in around the edges, but it feels less aggressive. You wake once then, twice adjusting blankets, shifting slightly. Each time you settle faster than before. Outside the wind stays low, a steady presence rather than a threat. The canvas moves gently overhead. The wagon seems to breathe with you, rising and falling in small familiar sounds. You focus on those rhythms, letting them guide you back toward rest. Sometime near the middle of the night, you wake with a dry mouth, throat tight from cold air. You swallow, then relax, reminded that discomfort does not always mean danger. This is another lesson learned quietly, without ceremony. By morning, you feel the difference. You are still stiff, still cold, but less drained. The night did not take as much from you. When you sit up, there is no rush of dizziness, no sharp edge of weakness. That feels important. As you step out into the pale light of dawn breath, visible once more, you glance back at the wagon. You think about how small choices like when and what you eat ripple through the night in ways you cannot fully predict. Out here, survival is not about heroic moments. It is about timing supper, saving the right food, and trusting that the quiet decisions you make before dark will carry you through until morning. By the time you settle again, the smells of the trail have become as familiar as faces. They cling to you, woven into fabric and hair, sinking deep enough that even sleep does not erase them. Smoke lingers, first sharp and dry, then wool-warm and slightly sour. Beneath it all sits grease animal fat rubbed into leather, and skin-sealing warmth in ways you can feel more than see. You notice how scent has become part of survival. It is not something anyone talks about, but it matters. Strong smells mean layers are doing their job. Smoke keeps insects away, grease blocks wind, wool traps air. Everything that makes you wrinkle your nose also keeps the cold from cutting too deep. Trail accounts often describe clothing stiff with smoke and oil garments that would never be tolerated back home. Out here they were prized. People learned quickly that clean clothes were colder clothes. You stop wishing for freshness and start valuing function instead. As night settles, you shift slightly aware of how your body heat builds inside the layers. It is slow, but it is there. The smell of smoke trapped in fabric almost feels comforting now, like proof that fire existed not long ago. You breathe it in steady and calm. Someone nearby opens a small pouch, releasing a stronger scent into the air. Tallow. It is thick and faintly sweet, unpleasant in most situations. They rub a bit into cracked hands, then into the seams of gloves. This odd little ritual shows up in several first-hand recollections, though it was never universal. It helped block wind and kept skin from splitting under cold stress. You watch, then follow suit, grimacing as you work it in. The wagon creaks as weight shifts. Outside, the world has gone still in that deep way only cold nights manage. Even the wind seems cautious. You listen, noting how silence here feels heavier than sound. Every breath feels louder. Modern interpretations vary on whether these layered smells and treatments meaningfully improved warmth or simply offered psychological comfort. Evidence points in more than one direction. From where you lie, it hardly matters. Your hands feel less tight, your face less exposed. Comfort, even if partly imagined, still helps the body relax. Sleep comes gradually. You drift aware of the wagon beneath you, aware of the scent-filled air around you. The smells seem to anchor you, pulling your thoughts away from the cold pressing outside the canvas. You wake briefly when the wagon shifts, then settle again, nose tucked deeper into fabric. At some point, you become aware of how quiet your breathing has grown. Slow, even, this is new. Earlier nights were restless, filled with shallow breaths and constant adjustments. Tonight something has shifted. The smells, the layers, the routines have combined into a kind of shield. The night deepens. Cold sharpens as it always does before dawn, but it does not feel as invasive. You adjust once carefully, then stop. There is a growing trust in your setup, fragile but real. When you wake again, the sky outside the canvas has lightened just enough to hint at morning. The smell of smoke still clings to you, mixed now with frost and damp air. You stretch slightly, feeling stiffness, but not desperation. As you sit up, you notice how everyone else moves with the same quiet confidence. No panic, no rushed movements, just the steady practice motions of people who have learned what works well enough. You step outside, breath rising in pale clouds. Frost coats everything, sparkling briefly before the sun can touch it. The smells follow you, trailing off into the open air. You realize they are part of you now as much as the dust on your boots or the ache in your shoulders. Out here, survival does not smell clean. It smells like smoke and grease and wool. It smells like effort. And as the day begins, you understand that these scents, once unwelcome, have become signs that you are learning how to endure the night. You stop thinking of sleep as something soft and welcoming. Out here, sleep is a position you negotiate with the cold. Tonight, that negotiation begins the moment you decide not to undress. The idea of peeling away layers feels almost dangerous now, like stepping out of shelter just to prove you could. So you stay as you are, button-wrapped stiff with fabric and habit. Trail life taught this quickly. People learned that removing clothes at night cost more warmth than it ever saved in comfort. Shirts worn all day stayed on. Trousers, too. Even coats were often pulled closer rather than set aside. You feel awkward at first, joints restricted fabric bunching where it never quite settles. But awkward is better than shivering. You ease yourself down carefully, testing the boards beneath you. Every movement sends a ripple of cold upward. You counter it by tucking cuffs tight, pulling collars high, sealing yourself inside your own clothing. The smell of sweat and smoke rises as fabric warms slightly. It is not pleasant, but it is reassuring. Someone nearby mutters that they feel like a bundled package rather than a person. A soft chuckle follows, brief and tired. Humour survives even here, thin but persistent. You shift again, finding a position that protects your core while sacrificing comfort everywhere else. Knees drawn up, chin tucked, arms crossed tight. A small but telling detail appears in several personal letters from the trail. Some travellers slept with their boots on, not for warmth alone, but because frozen footwear in the morning could delay departure or tear skin when forced on too quickly. You try it tonight, boots loosened but not removed, feet heavy and awkward. Sleep feels farther away at first, but practicality wins out. As darkness deepens, you become aware of how still everyone grows. Movements are minimized. Even breathing seems quieter, as if loud breaths might leak heat. The wagon settles into silence, broken only by the faint creak of wood contracting in the cold. There is no clear agreement among modern scholars on whether sleeping fully clothed significantly reduced cases of cold injury or whether it simply made nights more tolerable without changing outcomes. But personal accounts return to the practice again and again. That repetition tells its own story. You drift into light sleep, wake, then drift again. Each time you adjust something small, a cuff, a collar, a blanket edge, the cold probes constantly looking for gaps. You learn to close them without fully waking a skill that feels earned rather than taught. Outside the night holds steady. No wind now, just deep cold pressing down like weight. The canvas overhead feels rigid, almost brittle. You imagine frost forming on its outer surface, turning it into something stiff and unyielding. Inside your breath fogs faintly, then fades. Sometime in the night, your leg cramps slightly protesting the confined position. You breathe through it, careful not to thrash or expose skin. Movement costs warmth. You wait until the discomfort eases, then settle again. Patience becomes another survival tool, quiet but essential. When dawn finally approaches, it does not announce itself loudly. Light seeps in slowly, thinning the darkness rather than banishing it. You wake with the familiar stiffness, but without the deep ache that once followed colder nights. That feels like progress. You sit up carefully, boots thumping softly against the boards. Around you, others do the same, unfolding themselves from layers and positions chosen out of necessity. No one looks well rested, but no one looks defeated either. Stepping outside, you stretch slowly, letting blood return to places that went numb hours ago. The air bites, but the sun promises warmth eventually. You glance back at the wagon, at the rumpled blankets and layered clothing inside. Sleeping dressed did not make the night easy, it made it possible. And out here, possibility is often the difference between enduring and failing. The smallest bodies worry you the most. As evening settles in, your attention keeps drifting toward the children, even when you pretend it does not. They tire earlier. They shiver sooner. Their hands go stiff before anyone else's. You watch quietly as they are guided through the familiar routine layers added with care. Sleeves tugged down, scarves adjusted again and again. No one rushes this part. There is an understanding shared by every adult here that the night is harder on them. Smaller frames lose heat faster. Bones closer to the surface feel the cold more sharply. You see it in the way adults linger, checking fingers, rubbing hands, pretending they are just passing by. As darkness gathers, children are placed deliberately. Not by rank or affection, but by warmth. The warmest adults end up on the outer edges. The children tucked inward, where heat collects and movement is limited. It happens without discussion, shaped by repetition rather than rules. You find yourself shifting slightly to make space even before anyone asks. Trail life left plenty of written traces, and among them are repeated mentions of children sleeping wrapped in multiple layers and shared blankets, sometimes with adults positioned specifically to shield them from drafts. It was not sentimental, it was practical. You feel that practicality settle in as a child's back presses lightly against your chest, their breathing shallow but steady. Someone slips a hat down over a small head already half asleep. Another tucks a blanket edge more securely around thin shoulders. These movements are careful and quiet, done in the dark without waking anyone. The night does not forgive mistakes, especially with the young. There is a detail you remember hearing earlier in the journey, something odd but memorable. One family swore by placing warmed corn sacks near children's feet before bed, reheated briefly at the fire and wrapped tight. It was never common practice, and some thought it foolish. Still, you see someone trying a version of it tonight, hands cautious, checking temperature again and again before settling it into place. Inside the wagon, the air grows heavy with breath and fabric. You feel warmth building slowly, unevenly. Children settle faster than adults, exhaustion overtaking discomfort. Their sleep seems deeper, less interrupted. You envy that even as you remain alert, half listening for changes in breathing, half counting hours until dawn. The cold still comes, it always does. You feel it press in from the floor and the canvas probing gently, patiently. But tonight it meets resistance, layers, bodies, shared heat forming a fragile barrier. There are differing interpretations among historians about how often cold alone claimed young lives on the trail versus how often illness played a greater role, especially when nights weakened already fragile bodies. The accounts are not uniform. Some nights ended quietly, others did not. You do not dwell on that now, you focus on the present moment, on warmth held rather than risks imagined. A child stirs, murmurs something unintelligible, then settles again. You hold still, breathing shallowly, letting the warmth rebuild. Your arm has gone numb where it presses against another body, but you do not move it. Discomfort is easier to bear than exposure. Hours pass like this, the wagon creaks softly. Wind rises, then falls. At some point, snow brushes against the canvas, again faint but persistent. You adjust the blanket higher, sealing another gap. The child beside you sighs in their sleep. Near the coldest part of the night just before dawn, you feel the tension ease slightly. Everyone has found a balance. Heat is no longer escaping as quickly. The wagon feels less like a shelter and more like a shared space, fragile but functioning. When light finally begins to thin the darkness, you wake stiff and sore but alert. The children stir, last blinking sleepily, cheeks flushed from warmth rather than cold. That feels like a quiet success. Morning routines begin gently. Hands are checked, fingers flexed, feet stamped once, boots are on. Someone offers a warm drink, guiding a small cup carefully. Steam rises, carrying reassurance with it. You watch the children wake, fully rubbing eyes, already distracted by the promise of movement and daylight. They will remember the discomfort less than the adults do. That thought brings a small sense of relief. As camp comes back to life, you realize something that did not seem obvious at the start of the journey. Surviving the coldest nights is not only about protecting yourself, it is about protecting those who cannot yet adapt as quickly. The choices you make, the space you give, the warmth you share all ripple outward. Out here, endurance is rarely individual. It is measured by who wakes up warm enough to smile and who steps into the morning ready to keep going. The wind announces itself before you ever see it. Long before darkness settles, you hear it moving across the open land, flattening grass, whispering low and steady like something alive and curious. By the time the sun sinks, the breeze has sharpened into a presence you cannot ignore. Wind changes everything. Cold air sitting still is one thing. Cold air in motion is another, entirely. You feel it first on your face, then along your sleeves, testing seams and edges. It seems to search deliberately for weakness, slipping through any opening you leave unguarded. You turn your body slightly as you work instinctively, angling away from it, as if posture alone might help. People on the trail learned quickly that wind was often more lié to water rates than low temperatures themselves. A calm night could feel manageable, even when the air was bitter. But wind stripped warmth fast and without mercy. You sense that difference now, as the fire flickers and leans, flames pulled sideways, heat scattering instead of rising. As wagons are positioned for the night, you pay closer attention than before. They are not parked randomly. Broadsides face into the wind. Narrow ends are tucked behind others when possible. Gaps are closed. It looks messy from the outside, but there is logic underneath it. You help shift one wheel slightly, just enough to change how the gusts hit the canvas. There is an odd little habit you remember seeing earlier in the journey. One man always tied spare cloth strips along the edges of his wagon cover, letting them hang loose like fringe. When the wind blew, the strips fluttered and broke up the airflow, reducing the way it pressed against the canvas. You thought it looked foolish at first. Tonight you understand. Someone nearby has copied the idea, knotting torn fabric along a seam. It flaps softly, but the canvas moves less. Inside the wagon, the sound of wind becomes constant. It is never silent. It hums, rattles, sighs, sometimes rising suddenly as if startled. The noise keeps you half awake, nerves alert even when your body wants rest. You pull blankets tighter, sealing edges carefully. Wind finds gaps faster than cold ever did on its own. Modern interpretations vary when it comes to just how much wind exposure contributed to nighttime deaths compared to simple freezing temperatures. Some records emphasize storms, others barely mention them at all. The truth seems scattered across accounts shaped by geography, timing, and sheer chance. What you know is simpler. Wind makes everything harder. Sleep is light tonight. You drift for short stretches, then surface again when a gust snaps the canvas or rocks the wagon slightly. Each time your heart speeds briefly before settling. You learn to listen differently, distinguishing between ordinary movement and something that might need attention. At one point the wind carries a sound that makes you tense. A long scrape, then nothing. You hold your breath waiting. Eventually you realize it is only a loose board shifting somewhere nearby. The relief is quiet but real. The cold feels sharper when the wind slips through. It reaches places that felt protected before brushing cheeks, finding wrists, teasing ankles. You counter it by curling tighter, pulling layers inward. Your body feels compact now, efficient, shaped by the necessity. As the night deepens, the wind finally begins to tire. Gusts space out. The constant pressure eases into something intermittent. You notice the change immediately. Sleep comes more easily once the air settles, even though the temperature has not risen. By the time dawn approaches, the world outside feels calmer. The wagon rests more steadily. The cold remains, but it feels contained rather than aggressive. You stretch slightly, careful not to undo the warmth you have built. Morning reveals what the night has done. Frost clings thickly to the windward side of the wagon, heavier there than anywhere else. Canvas is stiff edges rimmed with ice. You run a gloved hand along it, feeling the resistance. As the camp wakes, people comment quietly on the wind, comparing notes, sharing small adjustments that worked or failed. No one boasts. Survival is not something you brag about here. It is simply something you note and move on from. You take one last look at how the wagons are positioned before climbing back aboard. You know you will remember this arrangement tonight and the next night, adjusting as needed. Out on the trail, the wind is never just background. It is an active force shaping where you stop, how you sleep, and how much strength the night takes from you. Learning to respect it rather than fight it becomes another skill you carry forward as the journey continues. Snow never arrives quietly the way you expect it to. Before you see it, you sense the change in the air. Sound dulls, distance feels shorter. Even the wind seems to soften, as if the world is holding its breath. By the time the first flakes brush your sleeve, night is already closing in. Snow on the trail is not peaceful. It is work waiting to happen. You watch it gather on the canvas, thin at first, then heavier, pressing the fabric downward in a way you can feel from inside. The wagon roof creaks softly, adjusting to the new weight. You make a mental note to check it later, knowing that even a small sag can turn into trouble by morning. People learned early that snowfall changed how nights behaved. The cold felt different, less biting in the air, but more demanding in every other way. Snow trapped sound, making the world eerily quiet, but it also trapped moisture, soaking into seams and edges if you let it. You brush the canvas from the inside with a careful hand, knocking loose what you can before it builds up. Someone outside moves along the line of wagons, tapping the covers with a stick to shake off accumulating snow. It is a practice routine done without complaint. Left unattended, that weight could stretch, fabric loosen fastenings, or collapse makeshift supports. Small efforts now prevent larger problems later. There is an odd little practice you notice tonight, something you have seen only once or twice before. A man packs snow deliberately along the base of his wagon building, a low ridge against the bottom boards. It looks counterintuitive, but you remember hearing that compacted snow could block wind from sneaking underneath. You decide to do the same scooping and pressing until a thin wall forms. Your gloves grow wet, fingers stiffening quickly, but the work feels worthwhile. Inside, the sound of snowfall becomes constant, a soft, persistent tapping that seeps into your thoughts. This is almost soothing if you let it be. You settle in, pulling blankets tight, aware that the canvas above you now carries a white burden. There is no single explanation agreed upon by modern historians for whether snow made nights more dangerous or more manageable overall. Some accounts describe snow as a blessing, insulating camps and muting wind. Others recall it as the start of misery, soaking supplies and freezing solid by dawn. Lying here, you suspect both are true depending on how well you prepared. Sleep comes in gentle waves tonight. The snow muffles sudden noises, smoothing the edges of the world. You wake less often though when you do. The cold feels deeper, heavier. It presses in slowly rather than striking sharply. At one point you hear a soft thud as a clump of snow slides from the canvas to the ground. You tense briefly, then relax. The structure holds. That small reassurance carries you through the next stretch of darkness. Your breath fogs the air inside the wagon, lingering longer than usual. Moisture gathers and you wipe at your face with a stick. Be careful not to let dampness settle. Snow brings water, and water steals heat faster than anything else. You tuck your chin down, breathing through the fabric trapping warmth and moisture close. Near the coldest part of the night, the snow slows, then stops. Silence deepens. You lie awake for a moment, listening to nothing at all. It feels strange, like being suspended between moments. Morning reveals the night's work. The world outside is transformed, softened, under a clean white layer. Wagons look smaller, half buried. Tracks are gone erased. You step down carefully, boots sinking with a quiet crunch. People move slowly, brushing snow from covers, checking ropes and seams. Your little snow wall has done its job. The space beneath the wagon feels less exposed, less drafty. You feel a quiet satisfaction at that. As fires are coaxed back to life, steam rises from melting snow, carrying a damp mineral smell. The cold lingers, but it feels different now, manageable, familiar. Snow does not make the trail gentler, it reshapes it. And as you shake out blankets stiff with frost and prepare for another day, you understand that each kind of night demands its own small adjustments. Learning those differences and responding without panic becomes part of how you keep going. By now you no longer think of the wagon as a single object. It has become a collection of surfaces, seams and spaces that either help you or betray you once the sun goes down. As afternoon fades, you start paying attention to what lies unused around you, not as clutter but as potential protection. Nothing goes to waste anymore. A sack that once held flour becomes padding. A bundle of letters turns into insulation. Even an old journal, its pages already read and reread, finds a new purpose tucked beneath a hip or shoulder. You hesitate only briefly before using it. Words can wait. Warmth cannot. People travelling this route learned quickly that the floor of the wagon was the greatest enemy at night. Wood offered no mercy, and beneath it sat earth that seemed to drink heat endlessly. That understanding shows itself in the way everyone prepares, now layering the wagon floor as carefully as clothing on skin. No one needs to explain it. Everyone has felt the cost of forgetting. You crouch low, arranging what you have. Spare sacks first flattened and spread, then folded garments you will not need until morning. You press them down firmly, knowing even thin layers slow the cold. It feels methodical, almost meditative. Each piece placed with intention. Nearby for someone drags in a bundle of dried grass gathered earlier in the day. It crackles softly as it's laid out, brittle but useful. You remember seeing this done before, dismissed at first as desperation. Tonight it feels like ingenuity. The smell is faint and dry, earthy, without dampness. You add a little of your own, tucking it where the boards feel coldest. Not everyone does this the same way. Some rely on bedrolls alone. Others build thick nests that make climbing in and out awkward. The results vary. Some nights reward effort, others ignore it entirely. There is no single formula, only patterns you notice over time. You settle into place, carefully testing the surface beneath you. It feels different tonight. Not warm, but less hostile. That matters. You pull blankets around you, sealing the space, then pause to listen as the camp quiets. The sounds are familiar now, the soft knock of wood cooling, the distant shift of animals settling. A low murmur as someone finishes a thought they have been carrying all day. Then silence, layered and deep. You lie back, adjusting once then again. The padding beneath you compresses, slowly moulding to your shape. Heat builds where contact holds. You breathe evenly, letting your body do its work without interference. At some point in the night you wake with a start, unsure why. For a moment the darkness feels unfamiliar. Then you realize what woke you. Your hip does not ache the way it usually does. The cold has not reached it yet. That small difference pulls a quiet sense of satisfaction from you. Sleep returns gentler this time. You drift longer between waking moments. When you do stir, it is to make small adjustments rather than large corrections. A corner tucked in, a knee shifted slightly. Each movement costs less energy than before. Outside the night behaves itself. No sudden wind, no falling snow, just steady cold pressing down evenly. You sense the difference immediately. Nights like this reward preparation. Others punish it regardless. That contrast stays with you, teaching humility alongside skill. Sometime near dawn, the cold deepens, as it always does. It presses through layers slowly, deliberately. But it arrives dulled, blunted by everything you place between yourself and the ground. You hold steady breathing, slow, waiting it out. Morning comes without drama. Light filters through the canvas, thin and grey. You stretch carefully, testing joints. There is stiffness, yes, but less pain than usual. You sit up and feel the layers beneath you flattened now, but still there. As you climb down from the wagon, you notice others doing the same quiet assessments. Someone nods once, approving their own setup. Another mutters about needing more padding next time. No one declares success. They simply adjust plans for the coming night. You gather your makeshift insulation, folding and stacking it again. The journal goes back into its place corners, bent now pages carrying a new weight. You smooth it once, absent-mindedly, before stowing it away. The fire is coaxed to life and warmth returns in stages. Fingers thaw, breath steadies. The ground crunches underfoot, reminding you what waited beneath you all night. As you move through the morning routine, you realize something subtle has shifted. You are no longer reacting to the cold as a threat, you are responding to it as a condition. Something to be worked with, adjusted to, accounted for. That change does not make the nights easier. It makes them survivable. And as the wagon rolls forward once more, you already find yourself glancing at the ground ahead, at the grass, the discarded scraps, the things others might overlook. Not as scenery, but as tomorrow night's protection waiting to be noticed. Animals change the night in ways you did not expect when the journey began. During the day they are work. They pull, they carry, they slow you down. At night they become something else entirely. Sources of sound, movement, warmth that you can feel even from a short distance away. As evening settles, you notice how wagons naturally drift closer to where the animals are tied. No one announces this choice. It happens quietly, guided by experience. Horses stamp and shift breath, puffing steadily into the cold air. Oxen stand, heavier, calmer, their bodies radiating a low constant warmth that seeps outward. People on the trail quickly learn not to sleep too far from their animals, especially in colder weather. Beyond the risk of wandering or predators, there was a practical reason. The heat from a group of animals subtly changed the air around camp. It was never enough to feel comfortable, but it softened the edge of the cold. You position yourself where you can sense it, not directly beside them, but close enough to notice the difference. The air feels less sharp here. The ground, trampled and packed by hooves, seems slightly less eager to steal warmth. You breathe it in, that mix of hay, animal sweat and cold earth. It is not pleasant, but it is familiar now. There is a small habit you remember seeing earlier in the journey that finally makes sense. One family always bedded down on the downwind side of their livestock, even if it meant rearranging their wagon at the end of a long day. At the time it seemed unnecessary. Tonight, as the breeze shifts and you feel warmer air drift past you, understand why they bothered. Inside the wagon, the sounds of animals settle into a rhythm. Occasional snorts, the soft clink of tack, a hoof scraping lightly against frozen ground. These noises become markers of safety as much as inconvenience. Silence from that direction would feel far worse. Sleep comes with those sounds woven into it. You wake briefly when a horse shifts, then drift again once the rhythm returns. Your body seems to relax more fully, knowing there is movement nearby. Life awake and breathing, sharing the night with you. Not every account of trail life describes animals as a benefit during cold nights. Some mention the mess, the smell, the noise, and the occasional kick or tangle of ropes in the dark. Others barely reference them at all. The truth seems to depend on the night, the weather, and the temperament of the beast themselves. Tonight they help. You feel it in the way the cold presses more gently, in the way your feet do not numb as quickly. You adjust your blanket once, then leave them alone, the warmth holds. Near the middle of the night, the wind shifts again, carrying sharper air across camp. The animals respond before you do, stamping and turning their bodies. The subtle barrier they formed changes shape and the cold slips in. You notice immediately waking just enough to pull fabric tighter, to angle yourself slightly differently. This constant adjustment has become normal. Nothing stays perfect for long. The trail teaches flexibility more than mastery. As dawn approaches, the animals grow restless. They sense the coming light before you see it. Movement increases. Breath clouds the air more thickly. The quiet warmth they provided all night begins to scatter as they shift and stretch. You wake fully joints stiff but functional. Outside, frost coats the animals' backs, glittering briefly as light touches it. They shake themselves, sending tiny crystals into the air. You watch oddly grateful. Morning tasks begin as usual. Lines checked. Harnesses adjusted. You move carefully among them, hands still clumsy with cold. Steam rises from their bodies, curling upward, carrying heat away but leaving a trace behind. As the wagon is readied once more, you glance back at the place you slept. The ground is churned and dark, marked by hooves and boots. It looks different from the untouched earth beyond camp, more lived in, less hostile. You climb aboard, settling into your spot, already thinking about where the animals will be tonight. Not as an afterthought, but as part of the plan. Out here, survival is shaped by everything that breathes around you. Not just people, but the animals that share your peace, your burden, and your nights. Learning to read their presence, to use it without exploiting it, becomes another quiet skill you carry forward on the trail. Where you stop matters almost as much as how you prepare. By late afternoon, your eyes start scanning the land differently. You're no longer looking for beauty or progress. You're looking for shelter. Subtle rises, low dips, anything that interrupts the wind or keeps cold air from pooling too deeply around you. The trail offers few perfect places. Most nights you choose between bad options and slightly less bad ones. A hollow might block wind but trap cold. Higher ground drains better but leaves you exposed. You weigh these things quietly, comparing the feel of the air. Against your face, the way grass bends the direction smoke drifts when someone tests a small fire. People travelling west learned this skill quickly or paid for it. Camps were rarely placed at random once experience set in. Even without maps or instruments, travellers developed a sense for how cold settled into the land. You find yourself trusting that sense now, even when you cannot fully explain it. Tonight the wagons stop along a shallow rise, not much of one, but enough to feel different underfoot. The ground is firmer here, less damp. You notice how frost gathers thinner than it did in the low places you passed earlier. That small detail reassures you more than words could. As camp takes shape, you help angle the wagon again, lining it up with others to block the prevailing wind. This has become second nature. You do it without thinking, the way you pull a collar closed when the air sharpens. Everyone seems to move with the same quiet purpose, as if guided by an unspoken agreement. There is a habit you recall seeing only once before. A man walks the perimeter of the camp just before dark, dragging a boot through the dirt, creating shallow channels that slope away from the wagons. It looked pointless at the time. Tonight, when frost forms unevenly and moisture gathers elsewhere, you understand. Water drains. Ice does not form where it pools. Small changes shape the night. You settle in as darkness falls, aware of the land beneath you in a way you never were back home. The earth feels solid here, less damp, less eager to steal the heat. You arrange your bedding, noticing how little adjustments now make noticeable differences. Sleep comes in stretches. You wake once to a sudden chill, then realize it is not the cold but the quiet that startled you. The wind has dropped entirely. The air sits heavy and still, pressing down. Cold behaves differently when it has nowhere to go. You curl tighter, aware that stillness brings its own challenges. In low places, this kind of night would be brutal. Here, on slightly higher ground, it feels manageable. You hold that thought loosely, knowing it may not always be true. There is no single explanation that fits every account of how camp placement affected survival. Some nights rewarded careful choice, others ignored it completely. Weather, timing, and chance all tangle together. What you know is simpler. Tonight feels better than some, worse than others, and that is enough. Near dawn, cold deepens once more, settling into the land like a final test. You breathe slowly, letting the hours pass. When light finally filters through the canvas, you feel relief, quiet and contained. Morning reveals what your instincts sensed. Frost lies thinner here. The ground crunches less sharply underfoot. Someone comments on it casually, not as praise, just observation. You nod, filing it away. As the wagons prepare to move again, you take one last look at the place you slept. It looks ordinary, unremarkable, yet it shaped your night in ways you felt with every breath. You climb aboard, settling into your place, already scanning the land ahead. The trail stretches forward, offering countless nights yet to come. Some will be worse, some better. Learning how to read the ground to choose where you stop rather than stopping anywhere becomes another quiet layer of protection you carry with you. Out here, survival is written, not just in what you bring, but in where you pause, where you rest, and how carefully you listen to the land before night arrives. Water becomes a different problem once the cold settles in. During the day, it is something you manage almost without thinking. You drink when you can, you refill when the chance appears. At night, it turns stubborn, slow, and uncooperative. As evening approaches, you glance at the containers near the wagon. Tin cups, wooden buckets, a small barrel tied carefully to keep it from tipping. You know what will happen if you ignore them. By morning, some will be useless blocks of ice, others cracked by expansion. You have seen it before, and you have learned not to pretend it will not happen again. People on the trail adjusted their routines around this without ever writing it down as a rule. Water meant survival, but cold demanded compromise. Containers were moved closer to camp. Some were wrapped in cloth. Others were brought inside the wagon space, sacrificed so liquid could stay liquid just a little longer. Tonight you choose one vessel to bring inside with you. It feels excessive awkward to make room for it among blankets and bodies. Still you wedge it carefully near your feet, hoping your warmth will keep it from freezing solid. The metal chills your skin immediately, but you ignore it, trusting the slow exchange of heat. Outside you hear the faint sound of someone chipping at ice already forming along a bucket's rim. It rings softly, a brittle sound that makes you wince. That effort will need repeating by morning. There is a small habit you picked up earlier in the journey that now feels second nature. You tip containers slightly before nightfall, leaving room for ice to expand upward rather than outward. It does not always work, but it works often enough to matter. You do it again, now careful and precise, then tuck the container into place. Inside the wagon, the cold settles in with familiar patience. You lie back, breathing slowly, aware of the water near your feet. It feels like a responsibility more than a comfort. You remind yourself that thirst in the morning can drain strength faster than hunger ever could. Sleep comes and goes. You wake once with dry lips, tempted to reach for the container. You resist, knowing that every movement risks undoing the warmth you have built. Instead, you swallow, letting the discomfort pass. Sometime in the night, the temperature drops sharply. You feel it before you know it, a deepening chill that tightens muscles and sharpens awareness. You curl slightly, pulling blankets closer, then still yourself again. By dawn, light filters through the canvas, pale and thin. You reach for the container with cautious fingers. It is cold but not frozen. A thin layer of ice clings to the top, easily broken. Relief settles over you quietly without celebration. Outside, others are less fortunate. Buckets sit cracked, rims split where ice pushed too hard. Someone mutters softly as they survey the damage. Water is salvage where it can be ice-chipped and melted slowly over a newly built fire. Morning routines shift to accommodate this setback. Time is spent thawing what should have been ready. Movements are slower, patience thinner. You sip carefully from your cup, the water cold but welcome as it moves down. As the camp comes back to life, you realize how much effort the night demanded without announcing itself. Not just staying warm, but protecting the things that make staying warm possible. Fire, food, water. Each one needs its own attention when cold takes hold. You stow the container again lighter now, and secure it for the day's travel. The lesson settles quietly. Nights do not only test your endurance, they test your foresight. When the wagon rolls forward once more, you glance at the land ahead, already thinking about tonight. About where water will go, what will freeze, what might crack if you forget. Out here, survival often comes down to small choices made before sleep. Not dramatic ones, just careful practical decisions that let morning arrive with fewer problems than it might have. Food behaves differently once the nights grow cold. During the day it is fuel and routine. At night it becomes fragile. You start noticing which items harden, which spoil, which turn stubborn and uncooperative once the temperature drops. Supper is no longer just about hunger. It is about what will still exist in the morning. As dusk approaches, you sort through what remains, hands moving solely, deliberately. Bread is checked first. Anything soft enough to freeze into a solid mass is wrapped and set close. Meat is judged by touch, then smell. You have learned to trust your senses more than labels or hopes. Cold preserves some things, it destroys others. Families on the trail adjusted their food choices quietly as the season changed. What worked in warmer weather became unreliable once frost set in. Meals grew simpler, heavier, chosen for how well they survived both cold and time. You feel that shift now, setting aside items that would freeze solid and become useless by dawn. Someone nearby pulls out a slab of cured meat hard as wood. They tap it against the wagon rim, testing it, then smile faintly. That will last. You trade a glance, understanding passing without words. Food that cannot freeze is food that can be counted on. There is a small, almost comical habit you notice tonight. A woman tucks a lump of butter into a sock before placing it inside her coat. She shrugs when she catches you looking, as if to say it works well enough. You file the image away. Tomorrow night you may try something similar. Inside the wagon, food is stowed with care. Anything needed for breakfast is kept close shielded from the worst of the cold. You wedge a small bundle near your hip, aware of its shape even as you settle in. It presses uncomfortably, but you accept it. Better that than chewing ice in the morning. The night deepens and you wake once to a strange sound. A soft crack. For a moment worry flares. Then you realize it's only a container contracting as the cold tightens its grip. You exhale slowly, letting your body relax again. There is no single pattern to how food behaves on nights like this. Some mornings bring surprises, others bring losses. You've heard stories of supplies ruined overnight, of carefully planned meals rendered useless by a sudden freeze. Yet other accounts describe weeks of successful adaptation food lasting far longer than expected. Experience seems to vary, wildly shaped by weather, storage and luck. You shift slightly, mindful of the bundle beside you. The warmth holds, not much but enough. You fall back into shallow sleep, thoughts drifting between hunger and rest. At some point your stomach tightens, a reminder that cold burns energy faster than effort ever did. You breathe through it, letting the feeling pass. Morning will come, food will follow. You trust that now. When light finally filters through the canvas, you sit up carefully, joints stiff but responsive. You reach for the bundle and unwrap it with cautious fingers. It is cold but intact, not frozen. Relief settles over you, quiet and steady. Outside, others are discovering mixed results. Some smile pleased, others sigh, setting aside items that did not make it through. There is no judgment, only adjustment. What failed last night will be handled differently tonight. Breakfast is modest but warm. The fire works harder now, fed with care. Steam rises from pots carrying familiar smells that pull everyone closer. You eat slowly, feeling heat spread through you, replacing what the night took. As camp stirs, fully awake, you pack away what remains, rethinking storage without even realizing it. Certain items move closer, others are sacrificed first. Your supplies shift, reorganized by cold rather than appetite. When the wagon starts moving again, the rhythm of the wheel settles your thoughts. You look ahead, then down at your hands, already roughened by wind and frost. Food is no longer just something you carry. It is something you protect night after night with the same care you give your own warmth. Out here, surviving the coldest nights is not only about staying alive through the dark. It is about waking with enough strength left to keep going. Enough food that still behaves like food. Enough foresight that the trail does not steal tomorrow before it arrives. And as the day unfolds, you already know that tonight once again you will choose what to eat, not just for taste, but for survival beyond the sunset. Illness feels closer at night. During the day, aches can be ignored. Coughs explained away as dust fatigue blamed on distance travelled. Darkness removes those excuses. When the cold settles in and bodies stop moving, every weakness announces itself more clearly. You notice it first in the way people check themselves before bed. Fingers flex slowly, joints tested, a quiet clearing of the throat that lingers a moment too long. No one dramatizes it. There is no room for that. Instead, there is watchfulness, careful and contained. Cold has a way of turning small problems into larger ones. A cracked lip becomes painful. A shallow cut stiffens and throbs. A mild cough sounds deeper once breath fogs the air. You feel your own body differently now, scanning for warning signs even as you try to rest. Trail life offered little margin for error when it came to health. Remedies were simple, limited to what could be carried or improvised. You know this without needing to be told. You have seen how quickly strength fades when sleep is poor and nights steal heat instead of restoring it. As you settle into the wagon, someone nearby passes a small tin without comment. Inside is a thick salve, pungent and dark. You recognize the smell immediately. Herbs and animal fat blended together meant to be rubbed into chests or joints. You take a small amount, warming it between your palms before pressing it into sore muscles. The scent is strong, almost medicinal, but it brings a sense of intention that helps more than you expected. There are stories from the trail of families relying on such mixtures night after night, not because they cured anything, but yes, they offered comfort and routine. Tonight that routine feels grounding. You work the salve in slowly, then wipe your hands on a scrap of cloth and settle back. Sleep comes lightly. You wake to the sound of someone coughing, the sound echoing strangely in the still air. It is not constant, but it repeats enough to keep you alert. You listen carefully, noting rhythm depth, whether it eases or worsens. After a while it fades, replaced by steady breathing again. The cold presses in, and you become aware of how it tightens your chest when you inhale too deeply. You adjust breathing slower through fabric, warming the air before it reaches your lungs. It helps. You hold on to that knowledge, storing it away for nights to come. There are conflicting impressions left behind in accounts of these journeys. Some nights passed without incident, illness held at bay by stubbornness and luck. Other nights marked turning points when a fever worsened or a cough deepened and never fully retreated. Patterns exist, but they are inconsistent, shaped by weather, exhaustion, and the resilience of individuals. You shift slightly, careful not to expose skin. The wagon creaks in response, then settles. Outside, the night remains quiet, cold, but still. That steadiness helps. Sudden changes are harder on bodies already strained. At some point you wake with a dry ache in your throat. You swallow, then reach carefully for the water container, taking a small sip. It is cold but soothing. You hold it in your mouth for a moment before swallowing, then tuck the container back into place and still yourself again. You think briefly about how little it would take for things to go wrong. A deeper chill, a missed meal, one more night without proper rest. The thought flickers, then fades. Worry is not useful now, attention is. As the hours pass, the cold sharpens, then steadies. Your body seems to adjust, finding a narrow balance between tension and rest. You breathe evenly, listening not just to your own breath, but to the subtle sounds around you. Everyone is still here. Everyone is breathing. When dawn finally approaches, light filters in, slowly turning the canvas a pale grey. You wake with stiffness, but without the heavy fog that follows truly bad nights. That feels important. Outside, morning routines begin carefully. People check on one another without making it obvious. A question asked casually. A glance held a moment longer than necessary. Someone offers a warm drink to someone else without explanation. It is accepted without comment. You stretch slowly, testing joints, noting aches that will fade once you move. Nothing feels worse than it did last night. That is enough. You wrap your hands around a warm cup when it comes to you, letting steam rise toward your face. As the camp fully wakes, the night's quiet vigilance eases. Whatever threats lingered in the dark did not take hold this time. It will not always be so. Some nights leave marks that do not fade with daylight. But today you rise with the others, sore but capable. You pack away the tin of salve, the cloth, the small precautions that helped you through. They become part of your routine now, as essential as blankets or food. Out here, surviving the coldest nights is not only about keeping warm. It is about keeping the body intact, attentive, and just well enough to continue. Each night you manage, that feels like a small victory quietly earned and quickly folded into the next day's work. Night sharpens your hearing. In the dark, every sound carries weight, and your mind insists on sorting each one into categories of safe or threatening. You lie still, eyes open, listening to the world beyond the canvas as if it were speaking directly to you. There is the familiar creak of the wagon as wood contracts. You know that sound now, the way it settles and complains when the temperature drops. There is the soft shifting of animals, the quiet reassurance of hooves adjusting position. Those sounds mean life continuing as expected. You let them pass without tension. Then there are the others, the ones that pull you halfway upright before you can stop yourself. A sharp snap somewhere beyond the firing. A rustle that feels too deliberate to be wind. Your body reacts before your thoughts catch up, muscles tightening, breath held. Living on the trail teaches you to listen differently. You stop asking whether a sound is loud or soft and start asking what kind of movement it suggests. Wind moves broadly. Animals pause, then move again. Wood settles once and stops. You learn these patterns not because anyone teaches you, but because sleep depends on it. You hold still, counting breaths. The sound does not repeat. Whatever caused it has moved on or was never what you feared to begin with. Slowly, tension drains from your shoulders. You ease back down, careful not to disturb the warmth you have built. Someone a few wagons over clears their throat. Another shifts position, boards creaking in reply. These small human noises bring comfort. They remind you that you are not alone in your listening. Everyone is doing the same quiet work, sorting night sounds from danger in their own heads. There is a small habit you have noticed in others and adopted without thinking. Before fully settling, people take a moment to memorize the normal sounds of the camp. The rhythm of breathing, the occasional clink of tack, the way the wind moves through grass. Anything that breaks that pattern later will stand out immediately. You do the same now, building a baseline in your mind. Sleep comes unevenly. You drift, then surface again when a sound nudges you back. Each time you assess more quickly than before. Most things are harmless. A branch scraping lightly, a canvas flap tugged loose. Once you recognize it, you let go. There are nights when listening saves lives, others when it steals rest without reason. You have heard both kinds of stories told quietly by firelight. Some swear they woke just in time to stop a runaway animal or chase off a curious predator. Others admit they lay awake for hours guarding against threats that never came. You suspect both are true depending on the night. The cold makes listening harder. It sharpens the senses while dulling judgment. You remind yourself of this, forcing your breathing slow, keeping panic at bay. Fear costs warmth. Calm preserves it. At some point, a distant howl drifts across the darkness, thin and wavering. It raises the hair on your arms, even through layers of fabric. You recognize it, though. Coyotes far enough away to be more sound than threat. You wait listening as the call fades and does not return. Gradually your body relaxes again. The night settles back into its steady pattern. Sounds repeat themselves in familiar ways. Nothing presses closer. Nothing demands action. As the hours pass, you wake less often. When you do, it is with a quieter mind. You no longer sit up at every noise. You have learned which ones matter. Near dawn, the world grows still in a different way. Not tense, but expectant. The cold deepens one last time, and even the animals seem to hold their breath. You lie awake, listening to that silence, letting it pass through you. When light finally thins the darkness, you sit up slowly, joints stiff but steady. Outside, everything looks ordinary. No tracks near camp, no signs of disturbance, just frost wagons and tired people emerging into another morning. As you stretch and prepare for the day, you realize how much energy the night demanded without ever touching you physically. listening, sorting, waiting. It is exhausting work done in the dark and rarely acknowledged. Out here, surviving the coldest night is not only about warmth and shelter, it is about staying alert without letting fear take over. Learning which sounds matter and which can be allowed to fade into the background. You pack away the night with the rest of your things, rolling blankets, tightening straps. The trail waits quiet and indifferent. And as the wagon creaks forward once more, you carry that hard-earned listening with you, ready to use it again when darkness returns. Midnight stretches in a way daylight never does. The hours between darkness settling and the first hint of morning feel elastic, pulled thin by cold and wakefulness. You lie there wrapped and still, waiting for time to behave itself again. This is the point in the night when patience matters most. Early evening has purpose, late night has hope, midnight has neither. It simply exists, asking you to endure it without reward. You become acutely aware of your own thoughts, how easily they wander, when the world offers no distractions. You shift slightly, then stop. Movement costs warmth, and warmth is precious now. You learn to measure every adjustment, carefully weighing relief against consequence. Most of the time, stillness wins. The cold deepens in subtle ways. It does not arrive all at once, it creeps. You feel it first in places that press too long against the boards, then in fingers curled tightly together. Your breath grows shallower, not from fear, but from instinct, warming the air before it reaches your lungs. People who wrote about the trail often describe these hours as the hardest, not because anything happened, but because nothing did. The body wants sleep. The cold resists it. You feel caught between those two forces, suspended in the dark. To pass the time, your mind reaches for small anchors. You count breaths. You trace familiar shapes in the dark, the outline of a blanket, the curve of a wheel rim. You listen to the rhythm of others breathing nearby. It becomes a quiet metronome, marking time when clocks mean nothing. Someone stirs beside you, then settles again. The sound is soft, almost apologetic. You understand the feeling. Everyone is waiting for the same thing. Dawn, movement, heat returning. There is a small trick you picked up from watching others over many nights. When thoughts begin to race, you slow them deliberately, imagining the morning routine step by step. The fire being built. The first cup warming your hands. Boots pulled on stiff but reliable. It is not optimism exactly, it is rehearsal. Your body responds to easing tension just enough to rest. Sleep comes in fragments. A few minutes here, a few there. Each time you wake, the night feels unchanged, endless. You remind yourself that it is not, it only feels that way. There are memories shared among travellers of nights that seem to last forever, followed by mornings that arrive suddenly, almost without warning. Others recall checking the sky again and again, convinced dawn should have come sooner. Time behaves strangely when cold takes hold. You adjust your position by the inches, careful and deliberate. The cold recedes slightly from one spot and settles into another. You accept the trade. There is no perfect arrangement, only rotating discomfort. Outside, the world remains quiet. No wind, no snowfall, just deep cold pressing evenly across everything. It feels heavy but predictable. You prefer this to nights of sudden change. At some point you realise your breathing has slowed. Your thoughts grow softer, less insistent. You're not asleep, but you are resting in a way that counts. The body takes what it can get. Then, almost without noticing when it happened, the darkness shifts. It is subtle at first. The canvas lightens by a shade you might imagine if you were looking for it. You hold still, afraid to be wrong. Then it happens again, a faint greyness where there was none before. Relief arrives quietly. It does not rush in. It settles into your chest and stays there. You have made it through the longest hours again. As the sky continues to change, movement begins around you. Someone clears their throat. Another stretches joints, popping softly. The spell breaks gently without fanfare. You sit up slowly, stiffness reminding you of the night's length. Your hands tingle as blood returns. Outside frost glitters, faintly catching what little light exists. Is cold still, but the worst has passed. Morning tasks begin in a familiar sequence. Fire first, warmth next. Food follows when possible. You move through it all with the quiet satisfaction of someone who endured something difficult without needing to announce it. As the wagon is readied once more, you glance back at the place where the night stretched so long. It looks ordinary now, unremarkable. You know better. Those hours tested you in ways no storm or sudden danger could. They asked for patience, for restraint, for the ability to sit with discomfort and not let it turn into panic. Out here, surviving the coldest nights is often about making peace with the longest ones, letting time pass without fighting it, trusting that morning will come even when it feels impossibly far away. And as the wheels begin to turn again, you carry that lesson forward, knowing it will be needed again somewhere ahead when midnight stretches thin and asks you to endure it once more. By now you have learned that warmth is not always physical. Some nights no amount of layering quite does the job. On those nights you turn inward using the mind the way you once relied on extra blankets. The cold presses in just the same, but how you meet it begins to change. You lie still, eyes closed, and bring your attention to your breathings, slow in, slower out. You imagine the air warming as it moves through you, lingering just long enough to matter. This is not something anyone taught you directly. It is something you arrived at after too many restless hours noticing what helped and what did not. People travelling the trail often spoke quietly of prayers whispered into the dark or songs hummed under breath, not to pass time but to steady themselves. You understand that impulse now. Repetition calms the body. Rhythm anchors the mind. Whether it is a verse remembered from childhood or a simple counting pattern, it gives your thoughts something to hold. Tonight you focus on memory. Not the journey ahead or the distance behind, but small ordinary images. A kitchen table at home, light through a window, the sound of someone moving in another room. These thoughts warm you in a way that surprises you. Your shoulders loosen slightly. Your jaw unclenches. Niboah, someone murmurs softly words too quiet to make out. It could be a prayer, it could be a reminder to themselves. It does not matter. The sound is low and steady, and it spreads a sense of calm through the wagon. You breathe in time with it, letting the cadence carry you. There are stories passed along the trail of people who claimed they could think themselves warmer, that focusing on calm and steady thoughts reduced shivering and helped sleep come easier. Others dismiss such talk as nonsense, insisting only physical measures mattered. Lying here, wrapped and listening, you suspect the truth sits somewhere between. The body listens to the mind more than people like to admit. You try a simple exercise, one you have refined over several nights. Starting at your feet, you imagine warmth moving upward inch by inch. Ankles, calves, knees. You take your time breathing slowly, letting the idea settle before moving on. It feels almost foolish at first. Then you notice your toes ache less. Or maybe you simply stop paying attention to them. Either way, relief follows. Sleep edges closer. Not all at once, but in gentle pulls. You drift, wake, then drift again. Each time you return to the same mental rhythm, breathing, counting, remembering. The cold still exists, it has not been banished, but it no longer dominates every thought. That shift feels important. It gives you back a sense of choice in a situation where so much feels imposed. At some point you realize you have not moved in a long while. Your body has settled into stillness without discomfort forcing you to adjust. That is new. You let yourself stay there, trusting the position, trusting the process. Outside the night remains unchanged. No wind, no snow, just quiet, cold, stretching toward morning. You meet it calmly, no longer fighting every sensation. When you wake again, the sky has lightened just enough to register through the canvas. You feel rested in a way that has nothing to do with comfort. Your body is tired, but your mind is steady. That feels like a victory. Morning unfolds as it always does. Fire is built. Hands are warmed. Breath turns visible, then fades as the sun rises higher. You move through these motions with a quiet ease that surprises you. As you sip something warm, you think back on the night, not on the cold itself, but on how you met it. You realize that learning to calm your thoughts did not make the night shorter or warmer, it made it gentler. Out here, survival is not always about adding more. Sometimes it is about using what you already have in a different way. A steady breath, a remembered rhythm, a mind that knows how to soften when the world hardens. You climb back into the wagon as it begins to roll, carrying that lesson with you. The trail stretches on, offering many more nights like this one. You know now that when warmth runs thin, you can still meet the darkness with something steady and quiet, and that is often enough to carry you through until morning. Morning never gives your hands back all at once. It returns them in pieces. First the ache sharp and insistent, then the tingling almost painful as blood finds its way back into fingers that forgot how to bend during the night. You cradle your hands close to your body, breathing slowly, letting the feeling come and go on its own terms. Simple tasks wait for you, and suddenly they feel complicated. Buttons resist. Knots refuse to loosen. Even lifting a cup demands focus. You remind yourself not to rush. Rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes cost more energy than the cold already is. You watch others deal with the same quiet struggle. Fingers flexed repeatedly, hands blown on gently even though the air is just as cold. Someone stamps their feet while holding a tin cup awkwardly between stiff palms. No one complains. This is simply how mornings begin now. Cold mornings do this reliably. You have learned that overnight stillness leaves joints reluctant and muscles slow. That first hour after waking is always the hardest before movement brings warmth back where it belongs. You work through it patiently, letting motion do its work. The fire helps, but not right away. You hold your hands near the flames, close enough to feel heat without letting skin burn. The sensation is almost overwhelming at first, sharp and uncomfortable. You pull back instinctively, then try again slower this time. Gradual is better. Your body tells you so. Someone nearby rubs their hands together with a scrap of cloth friction over fabric instead of skin. It looks odd, but you try it surprised by how much it helps. Heat builds without that biting sting, and you keep at it until fingers move more easily. Tasks begin to flow again. Straps tightened, bedrolls folded, a lid secured that might have defeated you 10 minutes earlier. Strength returns quietly without ceremony. You accept it gratefully. As the sun climbs higher, the worst stiffness fades. Muscles loosen, shoulders as you drop. You feel yourself re-enter your body fully, no longer bracing against the cold, but working alongside it. This transition happens every morning, predictable yet never pleasant. You think briefly about how different this feels from the nights. At night, stillness steals warmth. In the morning, movement restores it. The rhythm becomes familiar enough that you stop resenting it. This is just how the trail asks you to live. Breakfast is eaten standing, hands wrapped around warm containers, steam fogging the air. You sip carefully, letting heat spread inward. The taste barely registers. The warmth matters more. Around you, others do the same, quiet and focused. There are mornings when fingers never fully recover. You've heard those stories. Hands that stay clumsy all day. Strength that never quite returns. Today is not one of those mornings. You notice this with relief, though you do not say it out loud. As wagons are ready to move again, you climb aboard with movements that feel almost normal. Almost. You flex your hands once more, testing them. They respond slower than you would like, but reliable. The wheels begin to turn and the motion helps too. Vibration travels up through the wagon, loosening what the night tightened. You rest your hands in your lap, feeling warmth settle where it belongs. Looking ahead, you know tonight will do this again. Cold will take what it can. Morning will ask you to reclaim it piece by piece. This cycle no longer surprises you. It simply exists. Out here, surviving the coldest nights is not only about making it through the dark. It is about being able to use your body again when light returns. About fingers that can tie knots, lift tools, hold reins. As the trail stretches forward, you settle into the familiar rhythm of travel, hands steady on your knees. The day waits for you now, and you are warm enough to meet it. Breaking camp in the cold is never quick, no matter how well you plan. The night leaves everything stiff, reluctant, and slow to cooperate. You feel it the moment you step down from the wagon. The ground crunches under your boots, frozen hard each step, echoing slightly in the still air. You move carefully at first. Rushing only leads to dropped tools and torn fingers. The morning demands patience, even when you are eager to be moving again. Blankets are shaken out, frost scattering in pale clouds that catch the early light. The fabric feels heavier than it did the night before, damp with cold that has not yet let go. Others work nearby in the same quiet rhythm. No one speaks much. Words feel unnecessary this early, and breath is better saved. You focus on familiar motions: roll, fold, tie. Each step done the same way every morning, a routine that keeps your hands busy while your body warms. Cold mornings punish carelessness. You know this now. A loose strap can snap when pulled too hard. Leather stiffens overnight, resisting buckles and knots. You ease it, slowly warming it with your hands before forcing it into place. It takes longer, but it holds. Someone nearby struggles with a frozen latch, tugging harder with each attempt. You watch, then step closer, placing a hand over theirs, steady in the motion. Together, you wait a moment, breathing on the metal until it yields. No words are exchanged. None are needed. There are small tricks that make this work easier. Things you have learned by watching others fail and succeed. Keeping tools wrapped at night so metal does not bite skin at dawn. Laying ropes carefully so they do not freeze into useless coils. Even the way you stack supplies matters now, arranging them so the most stubborn items are easiest to reach. You lift a crate and feel the cold through the wood immediately. It seeps into your palms, sharp and insistent. You set it down, flexing your fingers, then lift again more deliberately. The ache fades faster than it did earlier in the journey. Your body remembers what to expect now. As camp slowly comes apart, the land begins to change. Light strengthens, frost dulls. The air still bites, but it no longer feels aggressive. You take that as a sign that it is time. Animals are ready, next their breath rising thick and white as harnesses are adjusted. They resist at first, stiff from standing still all night. You move gently, guiding them into motion without force. They warm as you do, step by step, muscle remembering purpose. There are mornings when breaking camp feels endless. Everything takes twice as long. Nothing quite works. You have seen those mornings too. Today is not one of them. Things are slow, but they move forward. That feels like success. You climb back into the wagon, settling into your place as the last items are secured. The familiar creak of wood under weight sounds different now. It feels less strained, more ready. The wagon wants to move as much as you do. When the wheels finally turn, there is a collective release of tension you can almost feel. Movement restores warmth more effectively than any fire. Blood flows, muscles loosen. The cold retreats grudgingly as the trail unfolds ahead. You glance back once at the place where the night held you. It looks ordinary again, just a stretch of ground already losing its frost. By evening, there will be little sign you were ever there. As the wagon rolls forward, you feel the stiffness leave your hands completely. They rest easily now, ready for the work ahead. You think about how different mornings felt at the start of the journey, how overwhelming even simple tasks seemed after a cold night. Now the process feels manageable, not easy but familiar. You know what to expect, you know how to respond. That knowledge carries weight of its own. Out here, surviving the coldest nights is not a single achievement. It is proven each morning when you can break camp hitch. The animals move on without injury or delay. Each successful departure feels like permission to continue. The trail stretches forward, offering new challenges, new nights, new cold. You sit quietly, letting the rhythm of travel settle your hands, steady breath even. Tonight will come again, it always does. But for now you're moving, and movement means warmth, progress and another day earned. You begin to notice how each cold night leaves something behind, a lesson, etched quietly into muscle and memory. It is not dramatic. There is no sudden mastery. Instead, there is accumulation. Small corrections stacking up night after night until they shape how you move without asking permission. As evening approaches again, you find yourself preparing earlier than before. Not because anyone told you to, but because the rhythm has settled into you. Tasks that once waited until dusk now happen, while light still lingers. Blankets are aired briefly. Extra layers are set aside within reach. Nothing is rushed and nothing is left to chance. You remember how early on mistakes felt loud and embarrassing. A forgotten glove, a poorly tied strap, a blanket left damp. Now when something goes wrong, it feels quieter. You notice it, adjust and move on. The cold still punishes errors, but you recover faster than you used to. Others around you show the same shift. Movements are smoother. Decisions happen with fewer words. People seem to anticipate the night rather than react to it. There is a shared understanding that experience has value here, even when it is uncomfortable. You spot a small change in your own habits that surprises you. You check the ground twice before settling in, once with your eyes, once with your feet. You notice slope firmness or moisture. Earlier in the journey, you would have overlooked these details entirely. Now they matter as much as the blankets you carry. Nearby, someone tries a new arrangement, stacking bedding differently than the night before. You watch without comment, curious but reserved. Some experiments work, some fail. The only rule seems to be paying attention to the result. Inside the wagon, you arrange your space with practiced ease. Items fall into place as if they belong there. Your body seems to remember where warmth holds best, where pressure becomes pain, where gaps tend to open. You make fewer adjustments once you lie down, trusting what you have learned. The night unfolds without surprises at first. Cold presses in steady and familiar. You meet it calmly, breathing slow, letting layers do their work. Sleep comes in longer stretches, now interrupted but less fragile. At some point you wake and realize you're warmer than expected. Not comfortable but stable. You take note of it mentally, retracing what you did differently tonight. The answer is not obvious. It never is. Success here comes from combinations rather than single solutions. Morning arrives gently without the sharp edge that followed earlier nights. You stretch, testing joints, noting stiffness that fades quickly once you move. That feels like progress. As camp wakes, there is a quiet confidence in the air. Not pride exactly, more like familiarity. People know what to do and they do it. The cold no longer feels like a personal challenge. It feels like a condition to be managed. You pack away your things with fewer pauses. Your hands work steadily. Nothing feels foreign. The routines you once had to think through now unfold on their own. When the wagon starts moving again, you settle in easily, feeling warmth return through motion. You look ahead, then briefly back, considering the night just passed. It did not stand out, and that you realize is the point. Out here, success is often measured by how unremarkable a night becomes. When nothing demands attention, when adjustments are small and expected, when the cold does not dominate every thought, you know there will still be difficult nights ahead. Storms, bitter winds, unexpected drops in temperature. Experience does not eliminate hardship. It prepares you to meet it without panic. As the trail stretches forward, you feel that preparation settle deeper. Each night adds another layer, not just of fabric or routine, but of understanding. You carry it with you now as essential as food or fire, and as daylight carries you onward, you rest quietly in that knowledge, knowing that when darkness returns, you will meet it better than you did before. Even when nothing goes wrong, the trail still feels fragile at night. That is what unsettles you. The cold does not need drama to be dangerous. It simply waits patient and indifferent until someone underestimates it. You feel that awareness settle in as evening comes on. The sky darkens, the air thins, and the camp grows quieter. People move with the same practiced routines, yet you notice how careful they are, how little they waste. No one treats supplies casually now. Wood is counted, food is measured, Blankets are protected from dampness as if they were precious cloth. There is a reason for that, even if no one says it out loud. You think about how quickly a minor mishap can become a major one. A broken axle during the day is frustrating. A broken axle at night with temperatures dropping becomes urgent. A lost glove is irritating. A lost glove on a bitter night becomes a threat that spreads up the arm and into the body. You've seen enough small incidents to know how fast they compound. Inside the wagon, you settle with care. You pull your layers close, tuck blankets tight, arrange your space so nothing important is out of reach. Not because you expect trouble, but because you have learned that preparation is what allows you to stay calm if trouble arrives anyway. Somewhere nearby, a man keeps his hat tied to his wrist with a strip of cord as he climbs into his bedding. It looks awkward, but it prevents loss in the dark. You notice it, then later find yourself doing something similar, with your own gloves threading a string through them, so they cannot vanish into the night. The habit feels small, almost silly, until you imagine reaching for warmth and finding nothing. The cold deepens steadily. You lie still listening to the familiar sounds of camp settling. Animals shift, canvas rustles, wood creaks as it tightens. Everything feels normal, and yet you cannot ignore the thinness of your protection. A wagon is not a house, a blanket is not a wall. You are out here with only the simplest barriers between your body and the night. Sleep comes but lightly. You drift and surface again, not from noise, but from that quiet alertness that cold seems to demand. You breathe slowly, letting your body relax while your mind stays loosely aware. At some point you wake to the silence of everyone else sleeping. That silence feels heavy. You listen for breath, for movement, for any sign that the camp remains intact. It does. The relief is subtle but real. There are nights when the cold feels like it is testing you, and other nights when it feels like it is merely existing and you happen to be there. Tonight sits somewhere between. It is not brutal, but it is firm. It reminds you that comfort is never guaranteed even when you do everything right. As the hours pass, you notice small changes in yourself. How you conserve movement, how you keep your core protected, how you no longer chase perfect comfort, only stability. These adjustments happen without conscious decision now. Your body has learned what matters. Near dawn, the cold tightens once more, and you feel the familiar ache in your fingers and toes. You do not panic. You tuck them in closer, press them against warmer parts of your body and wait. Waiting has become part of your skill set. When morning finally arrives, light seeping through the canvas, you sit up slowly. Everything works, though it takes effort. You breathe out, watching fog drift away, and you realize you made it through another night that did not announce itself as dangerous. Outside the camp looks ordinary. Frost, quiet voices, fires beginning again, yet you know how close everything always is to tipping the wrong way. You warm your hands near the first flames and glance around at the others. They look tired but steady. No one celebrates. Survival here is not a victory lap, it is a continuation. As Ulsund's wagons are readied, you notice your gloves secured and waiting exactly where you left them. That small detail makes you smile briefly, then fade back into focus. Small safeguards matter. They keep the night from stealing what you cannot afford to lose. And as the trail carries you forward again, you hold on to that quiet vigilance. Not fear, not dread, just awareness. The kind that keeps you attentive without making you frantic. Out here, the cold does not need a catastrophe to be lethal. It only needs you to forget how thin your defenses are. You do not forget. Not anymore. By now you understand that warmth changes when people gather. Not always for the better. Nights shared with others bring comfort, but they also bring noise, movement, and risk that solitude never does. You feel that balance clearly as evening settles and wagons draw closer together once again. There is warmth in numbers. Bodies clustered nearby hold heat in the air longer. Fires shared mean less fuel wasted. Someone always has an extra blanket, a spare cup, a small kindness offered, without comment. You appreciate that. On the coldest nights, the presence of others feels like another layer you did not have to pack. At the same time, closeness has its costs. Someone coughs nearby, sharp and persistent. A baby wakes and cries briefly before being soothed. A wagon wheel shifts unexpectedly as someone turns over in their sleep. Each sound ripples through the camp, tugging you closer to wakefulness. You lie still listening, aware that community keeps you alive even as it keeps you alert. Out here, isolation is dangerous, but togetherness is rarely quiet. You notice how people position themselves now, not just for warmth, but for peace. Families with restless sleepers drift slightly apart. Those with animals that spook easily are given space. These arrangements are never announced. They form naturally shaped by previous nights that taught hard lessons. There is a small habit that you catch yourself adopting without thinking. You place your bedding so you can reach another person if needed, but not so close that every movement wakes you. The distance feels exact, measured by instinct rather than inches. You would not have known how to choose it weeks ago. Inside the wagon, the air feels heavier tonight. Breath lingers. Heat builds unevenly. You adjust once, then stop letting your body settle. Too much movement would only disturb the fragile balance everyone has found. Sleep comes and goes in shallow waves. Each time someone stirs nearby, you wake just enough to register it, then sink back again. You learn to let other people's sounds pass through you without reacting. It takes effort at first, then it becomes another quiet skill. There are nights when closeness saves lives and nights when it complicates everything. You've heard both kinds of stories told softly during daylight hours. Some speak of shared warmth that made the difference. Others remember sickness spreading, tempers fraying, sleep lost to constant disturbance. Tonight does not lean strongly toward either. It simply exists, imperfect and shared. As the cold deepens, the advantages of company become clearer. Heat holds longer, drafts feel less aggressive. You tuck your hands in close and notice how quickly warmth returns when bodies are near. Near the middle of the night, a disturbance ripples through the camp. An animal startles. A rope snaps tight. Voices rise briefly, then fade as the situation settles. You hold still listening until calm returns. The moment passes, but sleep does not return as easily afterward. You breathe slowly, reminding yourself that this is part of sharing space. Trouble does not always announce itself politely. Neither does reassurance. You wait until the rhythm of the camp feels steady again before letting your thoughts drift. Dawn arrives quietly. Light filters through the canvas, pale and forgiving. You wake with the familiar stiffness, but also with the sense that the night held together. No one was harmed. No major disruption lingered. Outside, people greet one another with tired nods and half smiles. There is an unspoken understanding that another shared night has passed. Fires are built. Warmth spreads. The closeness that felt demanding in the dark now feels ordinary again. As you pack and prepare to move on, you reflect briefly on how much you rely on others now, even when it costs you rest. Out here, survival rarely belongs to individuals alone. It is shaped by how well people share space, warmth, and patience. You climb back into the wagon as it starts rolling, feeling the distance between you and others widen again with daylight. The separation feels welcome but temporary. Tonight you know the wagons will draw close once more. And when they do, you will settle into that balance again, taking what warmth and security others offer while accepting the restless sleep that comes with it. Because out here, surviving the coldest nights often means choosing togetherness even when it keeps you half awake. By now you've learned to watch the sky with a kind of cautious respect. Not fascination, not fear, just attention. Clouds mean something. Wind direction matters. Even the colour of sunset carries information you did not know how to read when the journey began. As the day winds down, you find yourself looking up more often. The air feels unsettled, restless, without being dramatic. You notice how birds move lower, how smoke from the fire drifts sideways instead of rising cleanly. These details settle into you, quiet signals that tonight may not behave like the last. People around you do the same. No one announces predictions. There are no grand forecasts. Instead, routines shift slightly. Wagons are positioned with more care. Extra layers are kept closer. Fires are fed a bit longer before being allowed to die down. Everyone is listening to the same cues, each interpreting them in their own way. There is an old habit you remember seeing early on that finally makes sense now. One man always checks the sky just before bedding down, not for stars, but for how clouds move against each other. He presses a thumb into the dirt afterward, gauging moisture. It looked like superstition at first. Tonight you find yourself doing the same without thinking, thumb coming away cold and dry. Inside the wagon you settle, with a little more tension than usual. Not fear, but just readiness. You place things within reach that you might need quickly. A scarf. A blanket edge left loose enough to pull higher. You lie back and listen as the night deepens. The weather does not announce its intentions, it rarely does. Some nights bring exactly what the sign suggested. Others turn unexpectedly mild. You have heard both kinds of stories told afterward with equal conviction. Prediction here is always provisional, shaped by experience, but never guaranteed. The wind rises briefly, then fades. Clouds pass overhead, thinning, thickening, never settling. You wake once to the sound of canvas shifting, then again when a gust rattles a loose strap. Each time you assess, adjust, and wait. Cold presses in steadily, not sharply. It feels heavier than the night before, but not unbearable. You tuck yourself tighter, breathing slow, letting the layers do their work. The uncertainty itself becomes part of the night, a presence you learn to live with rather than resolve. At some point, light precipitation begins. Not snow, not rain exactly, something in between. It taps softly against the canvas, then stops. Then starts again. You listen, counting the seconds between sounds, noticing how quickly the fabric dampens and then stiffens as cold takes hold. You drift in and out of sleep, never fully letting go. Each time you wake, you expect something to have changed. Sometimes it has. The wind shifts. The sound outside deepens. Other times, nothing at all is different, and you realize you woke only because you were waiting to. Near the coldest part of the night, the air settles. Clouds thicken overhead, holding what little warmth exists closer to the ground. You feel the difference immediately. It is slight but welcome. The night seems to decide on itself at last. When dawn arrives, it does so without drama. The sky lightens evenly, clouds pale and thin. The ground is damp, but not frozen solid. Fires catch quickly. Breath still fogs the air, but the edge of the cold has softened. People comment quietly on how the night went, comparing impressions more than facts. Someone expected worse, someone else expected less. Both are right in their own way. As you prepare to move on, you look up once more at the sky, now calm and ordinary again. You know it will change. You know your reading of it will never be perfect. Out here, survival often depends not on certainty, but on paying attention and adjusting early. On treating every piece, every sign as a suggestion rather than a promise. You climb back into the wagon as the wheels begin to turn, carrying that awareness forward. Tonight you will read the sky again, and tomorrow you'll remember whether it told the truth. You start to notice how children carry the nights differently than adults do. They complain less in the moment, but the cold leaves marks that last longer. You see it in the way they move at dawn, a little slower than the day before, a little quieter. Their memories of these nights will not be precise, but they will be deep. As evening settles, routines shift gently around them. Extra layers appear without discussion. Blankets are folded smaller, tucked closer. Someone lifts a child without asking, settling them where warmth gathers naturally. It happens so smoothly you barely register it until it's done. Inside the wagon, the child beside you curls inward, instinctively protecting their core. Their breathing evens out faster than yours does. Sleep finds them, quickly exhaustion smoothing the edges of discomfort. You envy that, even as you stay alert, half listening, half counting the hours. You remember seeing one family earlier in the journey wrap their children's feet in spare shirts before bed, fabric tied loosely, so circulation stayed easy. At the time, it looked improvised. Tonight you do something similar without thinking, using what you have, rather than wishing for what you do not. The child stirs once, then settles again. The night presses in steady and patient. Cold moves differently around smaller bodies, slipping in faster, stealing warmth more quickly. You shift slightly, careful not to wake anyone, creating a barrier where you can. It is not heroic. It is practical. Sleep comes and goes. You wake once to a quiet whimper quickly soothed by a hand placed gently against a back. No words are needed. The moment passes, absorbed into the night like breath into cold air. There are mornings when children bounce back immediately, shaking off the night as if it were nothing more than a bad dream. Other mornings they carry it with them, eyes duller, movement slower. You have seen both. Tonight will reveal which kind of morning this one becomes. As the hours stretch, you grow more still, conserving warmth not just for yourself, but for the small body pressed close. The cold finds you anyway, creeping into fingers, tightening your shoulders. You accept it, letting discomfort settle where it must. Near dawn, the child stirs again, then relaxes as light begins to thin the darkness. Their cheeks feel warm against your arm. That warmth feels like reassurance, quiet and fragile. Morning arrives slowly. You sit up carefully, mindful of stiff limbs and sleeping weight. Outside fires are already being coaxed to life, smoke rising in thin lines. You guide the child out of bedding, gently wrapping them tighter before their feet touch the ground. They blink against the light, confused but calm. Hands are rubbed together, feet stamped lightly. Someone offers a warm cup held carefully between small palms. Steam curls upward, carrying comfort with it. You watch closely, noting signs that matter. Colour in cheeks, steady breathing. The way shoulders relax as warmth returns. Today looks like a good morning. Relief settles quietly without celebration. As camp comes apart, children move among the wagons again, slower at first, then quicker as bodies warm. Laughter returns, soft and brief, as if testing whether it is loud. It is. You pack and prepare as usual, but with a sharper awareness now. These nights are shaping more than endurance. They're becoming part of someone's earliest memories of effort and survival. When the wagon begins to roll, the child settles back into place, already half distracted by the movement and the day ahead. You glance at them once more, then forward again. Out here, surviving the coldest nights is not only about your own strength. It is about carrying others through experiences they will not fully understand until much later. And as the trail stretches on, you know these nights will stay with them quietly long after the cold itself has been forgotten. By the time another night approaches, the cold no longer feels like an interruption. It feels like a companion you did not invite, but have learned to live beside. You notice this shift as you prepare again, moving through the familiar steps without resistance. Nothing about the routine feels new, and that is exactly what steadies you. The wagon rolls to a stop while there is still light enough to see clearly. You step down, stretching slowly, feeling the day leave your muscles in small waves. The ground looks ordinary, dry enough, firm enough. You accept it without debate. Not every decision needs revisiting once you know your limits. Camp takes shape quickly. Fires are built where they always are. Bedding is laid out with practiced ease. You no longer check and recheck each step. Your body remembers what works even when your mind drifts. As night settles, you feel the cold move in gently, almost politely. It presses against your back, your legs, your hands, but it does not surprise you. You meet it with the same calm you have learned to carry. Layers fall into place. Blankets tuck where they belong. Your space closes around you like a shell you have shaped over many nights. There is a small unconscious habit you catch yourself doing now. Before settling fully, you touch the items around you just briefly. A strap, a blanket edge, a cup, not to adjust them, just to know they're there. The gesture feels grounding, like counting something precious before sleep. The night passes quietly at first. No wind, no snow, just steady cold and the low murmur of a camp settling into rest. You sleep in longer stretches than you once did, waking only when your body needs to shift. Each time you move carefully, then still yourself again. At some point the cold sharpens as it always does. You wake briefly aware of it tightening around your fingers and feet. You respond without thinking, drawing warmth inward, adjusting just enough. The moment passes, sleep returns. Not every night behaves this way, you know that. Some will still demand more from you than others, but tonight feels like a confirmation of something important. You have learned how to exist here without fighting every sensation. When dawn begins to thin the darkness, you wake slowly, not startled, not tense. The light feels expected. You stretch, testing joints that respond more readily now. The ache is familiar, manageable. Outside the camp wakes in its usual sequence. Fires catch, smoke rises, breath turns visible, then fades as warmth spreads. You move through the motions with ease, hand steady, mind calm. As the wagon is readied again, you pause briefly, looking back at the place where the night held you. There is nothing remarkable about it. No sign of struggle, just earth and sky meeting quietly. You climb aboard and settle in as the wheels begin to turn. The movement feels comforting, a reminder that the night is finished and the trail continues. You look ahead, then relax into the rhythm of travel. These nights have changed you in ways that do not announce themselves. You do not feel braver. You do not feel stronger in a dramatic sense. You feel steadier, more aware of your limits and more confident in how to meet them. Out here, that steadiness is what lasts. Long after the cold fades, long after the journey ends, it is this quiet knowledge that stays with you. By the time the final night settles in, you no longer greet it with dread or resistance. It arrives the way it always has, quietly and without ceremony, and you make space for it without thinking. The cold moves in familiar, now pressing against the edges of your world, and you respond the way you have learned to respond. Calmly, deliberately, without hurry. You prepare with movements that feel almost automatic. Bedding arranged, layers set, small items placed where your hands expect to find them in the dark. There is no searching anymore, no second guessing. Your body knows what to do, and that knowledge feels as solid as anything you carry. When you settle down, the wagon creaks softly beneath you, a sound that once kept you awake and now barely registers. Canvas shifts overhead. Animals breathe nearby. The camp exhales together, slipping into the shared quiet of another night. The cold comes, of course. It always does. It presses against your back, your legs, your hands, but it no longer feels invasive. It feels like a condition you have accounted for, like rain falling outside a closed shelter. Present, but no longer personal. You lie still, breathing slow, feeling warmth gather where it can. Sleep arrives gently without some struggle. When you wake, it is not from fear or discomfort, but from habit. You adjust once, then let yourself rest again. Time passes without demanding attention. Midnight comes and jeers without stretching painfully thin. The hours move the way they are meant to move, steady and unremarkable. You drift between waking and sleep, aware but not tense, present but not alert. Near the coldest part of the night, you wake briefly, sensing the deep chill settle in. You draw your hands closer, tuck your chin down and wait. The moment passes, your body holds. You do not count breaths or imagine warmth this time. You simply trust what you have learned. When light finally filters through the canvas, it feels like a soft conclusion rather than a rescue. You sit up slowly, joints stiff but willing, and everything works. That is enough. Outside, the world looks much the same as it always has. Frost, quiet movement, fires beginning again. You step down, stretch, and breathe in the cold air one last time with intention. It no longer feels hostile, just real. As the camp wakes fully, you move through the morning without thinking about the night in detail. It has folded itself into you, becoming part of the rhythm rather than a story that needs retelling. When the wagon rolls forward again, you settle into place, feeling the steady motion beneath you. The trail stretches on, but something has shifted. The nights no longer loom ahead of you. They sit behind you now, lessons absorbed rather than feared. You look ahead, then let your gaze soften. There will always be cold nights somewhere. Hard moments, long hours, but you know now how to meet them without panic. And as the road carries you onward, that knowledge stays with you, quiet and dependable, like warmth held close to the body. Word count 124. Wind down, now the pace slows. The movement of the wagon becomes gentler in your mind, more imagined than real. The sounds soften. Wood no longer creaks sharply. Wind no longer presses. Everything settles into a calm, even rhythm. You let the details blur a little. The cold fades into the background memory. The ache in your body loosens. Your breathing evens out, slow and steady, no longer measured or deliberate, just natural. You are safe here listening. The hard parts of the journey have already passed. There is nothing left to prepare for, nothing left to guard against. The night has done its work, and so have you. You imagine the canvas above you now as something warm and still unmoving in a world that has gone quiet. The fire is out. The animals rest. The land holds its breath. Your thoughts drift easily, no longer tethered to details. If images come, they are soft and distant. A pale horizon. The gentle roll of wheels. A long road stretching forward without urgency. You do not need to follow it anymore. You can rest. Each breath carries you deeper into that rest-easing tension from places you did not realize were holding it. Shoulders soften, hands unlench. The space behind your eyes grows dark and calm. Nothing is expected of you now. You have endured. You have adapted. You have arrived at this quiet moment where nothing needs to be done. So let yourself sink into it. Let the sounds fade. Let the cold become a memory. Let the road carry on without you just for tonight. Sweet dreams.